Welcome everyone into another episode of KSR Zoom Action. This is our basketball breakdown show. As always, I'm your co-host, Zach Gagan, joined by my co-host, Brandon Ramsey, over to the side of me. I'm only going to try and point because it's always wrong. If you missed, it was on Sunday. We're recording this on Thursday. Again, we recorded the last one on a Thursday. We released our front court breakdown, kind of going through all of our pros and cons of Kentucky's front court. Of course, the second we released that video, Kentucky added another front court player in Reese Potter. But we've talked about it. We've covered all of this on Brandon. I think you just dropped your film room last night on Reese Potter as well. So that's on the website as well. If you want to go look at that, go to the YouTube channel. You can watch us talk about all of the front court players we did in that episode. It's like 45 minutes, something like that. So today we're going to the wings. And we actually had to move the goalposts like pretty drastically just to make this video worth it, because originally we were considering whether or not to put Mo Diabate in with the front court or the wings. We decided to put him in the wings just solely so we could have more bodies in this wing group, because we had 4 in the front court, not counting Reese Potter. And this wing video, we're going to cover Mo Diabate, Cam Williams, Tulane transfer, and Trent Noah, the returning sophomore from Harlan County. So we're going to focus on those 3 today. And like we said, Diabate, especially after watching the film, Diabate's a 4. He's a front court player. He's going to be a 4. That's what he's going to play at Kentucky. But for our own purpose of making this video more fun and entertaining, we're going to group him in with the wings. And we're actually going to start with Mo Diabate. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up some film that will play here in the background. This is just a bunch of clips that I pulled when I was watching some of his games over the last 4 or 5 days. I think I've snuck in like 5 or 6 games worth. I'm sure Brandon's watched 1,000 different games. Alabama, actually pretty easy to find film on. As opposed to some of these guys like Reese Potter and Cam Williams, who just not too much film. But Brandon, I'm going to go ahead and start here with Mo Diabate. Defense. I think that is the number one thing we're going to be talking about with this guy. Brings a lot of defensive versatility to Kentucky. 6'7", 215 pound, like just kind of like workhorse guy, like high motor, high energy, very talkative on defense is one thing you'll notice. Always pointing out plays. Him and Cam Williams are actually really good at that. So immediately, Mo Diabate brings a defensive physicality that Kentucky just did not have last year. Like, he's going to guard, especially you'll see some Kentucky clips in here. You'll see him pretty much just shove Lamont Butler, back into the perimeter because Lamont cannot physically get past Diabate. And then you have Andrew Carr struggling to get around him as well. So Diabate can guard a bunch of different positions. I don't know if he's a true 1 through 5 type defender. Like, if you get him on maybe a smaller point guard type situation, I do think he'll struggle. But guys that are as big as him, he's going to stop pretty much every single time. He's only 6'7", so he's not going to block a bunch of shots, but he's going to make life like some examples are Janai Broom and Mark Mitchell. When I watched those games when they're playing Missouri and Auburn, it didn't matter if those guys were 2 feet away from the basket. Diabate is going to stonewall them up. He's going to make life difficult, and they're going to miss a bunch of 2-footers. So there's a bunch more we'll dive into with Diabate, but I wanted to cover at least first the defense. There's a lot of really good rebounding skills that I'm sure Brandon will dive into as well. The offense will probably end on talking about him because that's not what he's here for. We'll just say that. So, Brandon, give me just kind of your first general thoughts on Mo Diabate as we really dive into who he's going to be as a player here at Kentucky. After, I should add, he spent his first 2 years at Alabama, 2 Elite 8 runs, Final Four in his first year as well. So this is a guy with a lot of college experience, winning experience, SEC experience, all that.
We talked about it at the time when, as Kentucky was getting a lot of these recruits, including Mo Diabate. We talked about it in our front court video, and I think that the most exciting part about landing a guy like Diabate is when you look at some of the questions, concerns, whatever you may say from last year's team. He pretty much checks those boxes one after another. Like, okay, you want to get more physical? Go get Mo Diabate. You want to get better on the offensive glass? Go get Mo Diabate. He was one of the best offensive rebounders in the entire Southeastern Conference last season. You want to get better defensively? Do you want to get more athletic, a little bit more versatile? Like, he brings all of these things. And then I think, too, a lot of times, especially nowadays with 2,000 transfers in the portal and all this stuff, it's so easy to get caught up at looking at the stats. And you can get really excited about the guy that averaged 19 points a game and made 74 threes at Alabama A&M, and that's all exciting and fun. And then you see a guy that averaged 7.2 points, whatever it was, last season coming off the bench at Alabama, and maybe that doesn't spark this rabid excitement as for some people. But to me, it's like, hey, we're trying to win championships here. Like we're trying to win SEC championships. We're trying to go to the Final Four. We're trying to cut down. We're trying to cut down the nets. And this is a guy that has won at a really high level in the SEC and one of the best conferences we've seen in college basketball history. Last year, he's been to a Final Four, as you said. He went back to the Elite Eight this past season, playing a role. And you need guys that can excel in a role. And whether that ends up being a starting role for him this year or one off of the bench, similar to what he did at Alabama, I don't really think that matters. I think that you have a guy that's a plug and play dude that whether he expands his role a little bit or not, you know exactly what you're getting in Mo Diabate because he's coming from a place that, quite frankly, was better than Kentucky last season.
Yeah.
And anytime you can pull guys like that, to me, that's a really good day as a fan of the Wildcats. And, you know, we're seeing it here as the video rolls. You already touched on it. I mean, to me, the name of the game with him is versatility. You're going to get so many different things from Mo Diabate, and that's not just defensively. I think that, you know, probably since the day he committed, we've covered that into the floor pretty darn well with Mo Diabate and what he's going to bring. But honestly, I'm excited about the offensive fit as well because the amount of space that we saw Kentucky play in next season, there's a couple of things that he's going to be able to do. One, and I think this is the reason why it was fair to move him into this wing section, even though you're 100% right, he might play all of his minutes at the 4 this season.
Maybe some 5.
And maybe even some small ball 5. But in Alabama's lineup, like when they had Clifford Amore and Grant Nelson in there, like Mo Diabate played with those guys, and he was playing the 3 for Alabama last season. And he also was more of a face-up, drive it at you sort of guy. You know, his shot's not pretty, but it did go in at a pretty high percentage on low volume. Like I'm not going to get too caught up in the 3-point shooting numbers. Like I honestly don't really care if he makes threes or not for Kentucky next season. Yeah. He's not the guy I'm relying on for that. But I do think he's going to attack closeouts at a high level. He's an excellent screener, which is going to be huge in Kentucky's offense. He's an excellent cutter, which is going to be huge in Kentucky's offense. You see that right now he kind of did a little bit of a Barkley there, which is where you dribble it in and you kind of turn your drive into a post move. He's going to do a lot of that where he can utilize his size or athleticism or strength against smaller defenders. He's a stud in transition because he can get out and start the break. You can throw it ahead to him and he can, you know, attack off of a couple dribbles, and all those things lend themselves very well to Coach Pope's offense. So I think it's easy to get caught up in like Kentucky's offense, Coach Pope's offense, that equals 3-point shooting. Sometimes, yes, but not all 5 guys have to be dead-eye 3-point shooters. I think that his skills not only are going to help make everybody else better, but I think that then everybody else's skill around him, as you saw at Alabama, a place that shot a bunch of threes and played just as fast, if not faster, than Kentucky, you're going to see those skills really flourish in Coach Pope's offense. So I'm really excited, not just defensively. I think he's going to be one of the best defenders in the Southeastern Conference, but I actually think he fits what Kentucky wants to do offensively pretty well too.
Yeah, while we're talking, I'm going to keep talking about the offense then while we're on it because my brain is on that right now. So like you said, I'm not worried about the 3-point shooting. Like his release is really slow and it's low. Like if he's in the corner and he's open, I think he'll take them. But otherwise, like that's not why he's here. The straight line drives, I think that's what he's best at. He's really good at like, I don't know if you know, like at least 3 or 4 different times in the games I've watched, he's really good at like a deceleration Euro step type move where like he'll be sprinting down the floor and all of a sudden he stops on a dime and does his little Euro step and he's going to easily just lay like a soft hand, 1-footer right in the basket. So he's good at that type of stuff. Like you said, he'll back down and then he'll try and wiggle his way into like just a straight line drive. Yeah, he can, like you're seeing right there, like he's really good at once he has like a head of steam to the basket and he's got like a guy he knows he has a mismatch on, he's going to be able to get to the rim pretty well. The 3-point shooting, not too that's not anything I'm too worried about because I don't think that's what he's in here for. As a screener, I think is really where he's going to be a lot of fun. I do think he'll do more like top of the key playmaking type stuff than he did at Alabama because he really didn't do much of that. It looked like, or at least from what I was watching. So it's really tough to tell, I guess, how good of a playmaker he is. Like I saw some flashes and stuff, but he did have some bad turnovers. Like he might have been like a 1-to-1 assist to turnover guy, maybe a few more assists last season. But like dribble handoffs and pick and roll stuff, like he's really smart at. And Brandon Garrison and Amari Williams did this a lot last year too, where they would get the ball on like a dribble handoff or a potential pick and roll situation, and instead of like letting that formulate, they would slip it immediately and like dart right towards the rim. And Mo Diabate does that a lot, where he gets the ball at the top on what could be a dribble handoff, and instead of handing it off to Mark Sears or whoever, he just sprints right to the rim because everyone's so focused on an All-American potentially shooting a three that he's got wide open lanes to the rim. Easy buckets for him. So I think that's a big part of his offense too, or what his offense will be at Kentucky, is doing stuff like that. Obviously, Jalen Lowe is not Mark Sears, but kind of the same sort of threat because you're going to have a lot of outside shooters around him. I am interested to see how like Mark Pope, what the rotation is like with him, because I don't think he's a guy. Mo is a guy that you can play like it's going to be tough if Mo and let's say Otega are in with like let's say Brandon Garrison is still shooting 30% from three. If you've got those three guys in at the same time, the spacing could be interesting. We'll see how much the passing actually makes up for the lack of just like pure outside shooting in that sense. But let's see here, Brandon. I'll let you go ahead and dive onto more Diabate stuff. Take me more into the rebounding rates, because I know that's a big thing for him. He's got really good rebounding numbers. I think he would have been first on Kentucky in offensive rebounding rate last season, and then second in defensive rebounding rate, only behind Amari Williams. So this guy is an absolute workhorse on that end. What have you seen from that area, and how do you think that might translate to Kentucky? And then just give me more Mo Diabate thoughts. I like talking about him. He's a fun player to watch.
He's really fun, and I actually want to touch on one thing just because you mentioned it there, and then I'll get into the rebounding numbers. But you talked about him as sort of a facilitator and maybe playing some of that role that we saw Amari Williams take on, so much last year, where he's kind of facilitating some of the offense at the top of the key. And I think that with Brandon Garrison and Jaden Quinn, it's obviously kind of penciled into a lot of those minutes at the 5 spot. I do think that you could see somebody like Mo Diabate take over more of that role than, last year's pretty much all Kentucky's 5-man that was doing this. I think that you could see not just Diabate, but even Yelovich do some of that this season, because they have an interesting ability, unlike to some extent Amari Williams and Brandon Garrison, where when he's getting into like, the handoff or the zoom actions or whatever it may be, he's also now such a bigger threat to keep it and play make on his own, getting downhill, than those 5 men would be. And I think that could really unlock some interesting and fun things for Kentucky's offense, where now you have somebody who's much more comfortable with the ball in his hands as a creator than your traditional 5-man with it, whether it's Mario Williams last season or certainly Jaden Quinn and Brandon Garrison this season. That's not to take away, from any of the skill level those guys have, because I think they'll do just fine in those situations. And we talked a lot about that in our front court episode, but I do think that you can unlock some different things with Diabate as that sort of point forward offensive initiator in the half court. So something to watch, I think, this season as Kentucky gets into the season. But you're absolutely right, Zach. I think that Mo Diabate is from day one a game changer on the offensive glass. And Jaden Quinn is certainly that too, but from the 4 spot. And that was something that I was disappointed in last season from Kentucky. I think that for much of the season, we probably underrated Kentucky's defensive rebounding, quite honestly. It was something that, especially early on in the season, was kind of a point of contention. And maybe outside of Amari Williams, we weren't great on the defensive glass, but quite frankly, Amari Williams was so dominant that, Kentucky still finished like top 35, top 40 in defensive rebounding. It was far from a weakness last season, but they were also like 230th in offensive rebounding. And I think that absolutely has to be more of an emphasis going forward. And I think that based on some of these guys that Coach Pope took in the front court, I think that you're going to see that. Mo Diabate as a 6'7" forward was literally one of the best offensive rebounders in the Southeastern Conference last season. He was 13.0% on the offensive glass, which just looking
that's crazy.
Over to Kentucky,
I don't think Kentucky had anyone higher than 10 on offensive rebounding.
Amari Williams was 10.3. So
there you go.
That gives you an idea of how good he was on the offensive glass. There was nobody at that rate last season, or like in 2024 for Kentucky. I'm going to look back at Oscar Tshiebwe. So like Oscar Tshiebwe, obviously the best offensive rebounder, arguably of our lifetimes. He was 19.6. So that does give you kind of the
that's an insane number
end
when
of
you
the
say it
bell
out loud.
curve. Yeah, it really is. But Mo Diabate, again, like the dude's 6'7", and like so that this comes from really crashing the glass. and he does such a good job of getting positioning. Like there's a lot of times, coaches are going to, since you were in second grade, they yell at you to box out. That's kind of thought of as a defensive rebounding tool. Mo Diabate boxes out offensively. Like he's getting himself in position to get an offensive rebound every single time down the court, and he'll certainly help on the defensive end as well. He was 24,
yeah, 24 defensive, right?
on that end, which again to compare, Amari Williams was 29.6, and he was considered one of the best in all of college basketball last season. He would have been the second best defensive rebounder by quite a bit on last year's Kentucky team. So I think that, again, pairing what he can do as kind of an offensive initiator, what he can do in transition. We talked about kind of the pure defensive ability that he has, which I do agree. I mean, he's so switchable and is going to do that at a really high level. But then whether it's ending possessions on the defensive glass or getting you extra possessions on the offensive glass, I'm really excited, again, especially when you consider those things kind of being a point that we wanted to improve on from the 2024-2025 roster to 2025-2026. To me, he's the perfect guy to bridge that improvement between year one and year two of Coach Pope.
I think on the rebounding note, especially on defensive rebounds, he's someone that when he grabs an offensive or defensive rebound, the head is turned up and looking right down the floor, and he wants to go. He wants to go. He wants to run. He wants to try and get himself. He's usually not looking to score immediately. Like he'll try and look to playmaker or maybe get it to a guard once he gets across half court. But he has, and Pope will give him the freedom to grab that rebound and make these runs himself. Like he's very capable with the ball in his hands. Sometimes he could get some tunnel vision. It's like those straight line drives. Like sometimes they just won't work because he makes them very challenging to make. Like I think he was still like 64% or something on close twos per Bart Torvik. So, which is like a pretty good number for someone like him who's going to get most of his shots down there. But it could probably be a little higher. And he's, like I said, a little bit of a tunnel vision in that regard. But yeah, he's really good at just grabbing the rebounds and wanting to try and turn the ball up the court. And that's a product of playing, in a high paced offense like Nate Oates' And I don't, there's a lot of comparisons between Oates and Pope's offense, but I think a lot of Oates is really like more guard oriented in terms of like actually starting the offense, whereas Pope is probably more like the inverted way. Like they want to get the ball more and forwards hands at the top of the key. But in terms of like actual pace and how fast they want to play and how quick they want to get up shots and everything, there's similarities there. So that transition for him should be pretty easy. I will say and there's flaws to his game, obviously, but one thing that I think really hurt him at Alabama was the foul trouble. Like, I mean, the guy, he averaged 16 minutes a game. He fouled out of 5 games. I think he had 9 or 10 games with 4 fouls. His foul called per 40 minutes per Ken Palm was like 6.0. I think the highest on last year's team was 4.9, and that was Colin Chandler, who like hadn't played basketball in 2 years and didn't know what he was doing out there half the time. So I do think that's going to be an issue. And from what I saw, it wasn't so much like when he gets like a Janai Broom or an Andrew Carr or a Mark Mitchell, like in the post, he's actually pretty good at defending those guys. Like he's very good at keeping hands straight up. Like didn't do a lot of putting his hands over. Like he's not the tallest guy, but he's just so strong that he really doesn't need to like push his hands over and get cheap fouls like that. But a lot of it is like getting himself out of control. Like he's just so physical sometimes that he's just going to barrel over guys and pick up cheap fouls and stuff. So that was probably his number one issue and probably the only reason he played 16 minutes a game at Alabama. But he came off the bench, and let me tell you, pretty much all the close games I watched, like this guy was playing in the final 5 minutes. So Nate Oates wanted him out on the floor as well because he just knew what he could provide.
One of the things I'll say, Zach, and it just kind of hit me as you were saying it, that I obviously understand what you're saying. I'm not necessarily arguing with you when you say that it's why you played 16 minutes, and that's one of the biggest issues. But like, honestly, with Kentucky's front court depth, wing depth, whatever you want to call it, like I'm not sure it is a huge issue.
Be an issue.
I want the dude to go in there and be super aggressive defensively because that's what he's really good at. And sure, will that lead to him maybe only playing 16 to 20 minutes a game and getting 3 to 4 fouls a game? And will that be frustrating at times? Might that even cost us one game at some point? Maybe, but I bet you over the course of the season he'll win us more games with the blocks, with the turnovers, with the missed shots that he forces, and all that. Like we didn't have that guy last year that like had a positive trade-off between fouling and kind of wreaking havoc. I remember at one point last season, we were the worst in the SEC at causing turnovers, and also we were fouling the most. Like, that literally makes my brain like ooze out of my ears. It's so insane. Like, if you're going to foul a crap ton, you sure as heck at least better get some steals. And Kentucky wasn't doing that last year. He's at least going to win that battle because we all know officiating's terrible and he's going to get away with a lot of crap. So, like, I would rather have that guy. And if that means he plays 19 minutes a game, guess what? That means more minutes for Andre Yelovich. Like, I don't think that's going to be a bad thing. Or that means more minutes, maybe Twin Tower, Garrison, and Jaden Quinitz. I don't think that's the worst thing. So, like, I don't really want to rein that in too much. Obviously, some of the, the silly fouls and all that, that's a different story. But, like, I don't think that he's going to play 25 minutes a game. Like, I would rather him play 16 to 21, 22 minutes and go foul the heck out of some people sometimes and get 2 blocks and 2 steals a game and shut down whoever you're guarding. I'm good with that.
Yep. No, that's a great point. I won't really argue with it either. I guess my point for that is there's gonna be games where he picks up 2 fouls in the first 3 minutes and he has to sit a lot of the time. So, like, that's gonna happen. There's gonna be times where it's 5 minutes left in the game and he can't be on the floor because he's already fouled out or he's got 4 fouls and Pope has to wait another couple minutes. Like, those moments are going to happen because I do think he's going to have a larger role at Kentucky than he did at Alabama, or that's going to be the expectation going in, just because of how much they didn't have a guy like that last season. So they're going to really, I think, emphasize stuff like that with him next season. But that's a great point. Like, I mean, I don't think anyone on this team is going to play 25 minutes a game anyways. So the fouls might not mattering too much. But, like, I mean, how many times did it happen with Amari Williams last year where he had to miss 12, 13 minutes of a first half because he's picking up cheap fouls and stuff like that. So we'll see if he can, at least cut out on some of just the silly things where he's just running people over because he's so much bigger than them. But like I said, he's got 50, 60 games under his belt doing all this at a high level. So he'll be able to pick up some of those mistakes and learn from them a little bit. But let's see here, Brandon. I don't think I have any other major things I want to talk about. I'm looking at my little list I've got written down. Oh, a stat I did see by way of, actually, I'm going to ask you this right now. Do you still have your Synergy login? I know they had that whole.
No, it's a sore subject. But,
no, sore subject.
Synergy, which, I mean, different subject for a different day. But no, Synergy pretty much shut down all password sharing and
Well, on that note, I saw a Synergy stat from someone at 24/7 Sports that said that Diabate's defensive field goal percentage when opposing players were driving at him towards the rim was 27%. That's pretty good.
Seems good to me.
Seems good. So anything else you want to say about Diabate before we move on to our guy Cam Williams?
I don't think so. Let's talk about some Cam.
Yeah, let's do it. While I switch over videos here, Brandon, I'm going to let you just kind of riff for a second, if that's all right. Give us your initial thoughts on our guy.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to Cam Williams, it's funny how I think because of when he committed, half of us almost kind of forget that this is a pretty exciting pickup because if you remember, he actually committed before the season was over. It was 8 or 10 hours before we played Tennessee in the Sweet 16 in Indianapolis that we got Cam Williams. So I think just by nature of that, it's like, he's been with us for so long that we almost forget that he's a new piece to the team. But I think that anytime you get a guy with this sort of kind of upward trajectory to his career, it's really exciting. And I think that clearly one of the goals also this year, because he had the time to do it, was to get some guys with some multiple years of eligibility so that hopefully Kentucky can start to build some continuity over the next couple of years. That in year one, Coach Pope just had to take as many talented guys as he could to try to find a way to win some basketball games because he, like Kentucky was still in the thick of recruiting right now a year ago. Now we've been done for, several weeks with, aside from Reese Potter. So I think that getting a guy with 3 years of experience, I don't necessarily expect him to be at Kentucky for 3 years, quite frankly. It's something I've talked about, and I know that some people don't necessarily agree when I say this, and I don't mean for it to be a hard and fast rule, but to me, I look at guys on a 2-year evolution scale at a place like Kentucky. You're going to come in year one, and you're going to get your feel of the program, and you're going to play your role, whatever. And then after year 2, I think one of two things is generally going to be true. Again, generally, you're either going to go to the NBA, or quite frankly, you weren't good enough, and we're probably going to start to recruit over you. That doesn't mean you all of a sudden don't play. It just means like, hey, it's probably time to move on to getting somebody else into these minutes. And again, there's always going to be exceptions to that. But like, I think that by the time Cam Williams is a junior, he's either going to be an NBA player, or we're going to need to get better than whatever Cam Williams was. But when you talk about a guy who's a 40% 3-point shooter on high volume, I think there's been some concerns about Kentucky's 3-point shooting because, quite frankly, it's probably the one area where they didn't improve from year one to year two. I don't think it's as big of a concern as what some people maybe are making it out to be, but I do think it's fair to say that it's not a market improvement from year one to year two. Anytime you lose guys like Jackson Robinson and Kobe Bray, it's really hard to improve on that. But Cam Williams is a guy that answers a lot of those worries, in my opinion. He's also athletic. He's 6'8". He brings some of that positional versatility that we've talked about as well. He himself is not a bad defender. 3.7% block rate from the wing is pretty big time. 2.7% steal rate, something that we could have talked about with Diabate as well as his Hakeem percentage. I believe it was like 6.9. Cam Williams is 6.4. Those are some pretty big time numbers when you talk about, again, getting more athletic, getting better defensively, causing more havoc on that end of the floor. But to me, what I'm most excited about, 6'8" guy going into year two that made 70 plus threes, made 60 plus threes at least, made him at 40% plus from the field. I'm really excited about the role that Cam Williams is going to play as a sophomore at Kentucky.
Yeah, I think Cam Williams might be the most like intriguing prospect on next year's teams in terms of like just after watching the film, I still don't really know like where he'll fit in on Kentucky because first of all, this Tulane team should have been so much better than their record. Like I thought they had a lot of really good players around Cam Williams, and Ron Hunter had like a pretty decent, like talented roster around Cam. Cam was probably like the fourth or fifth best player on that team. I felt like he was pretty good, like all ACC freshman. I think we mentioned it in the last video, but he was 17 for a good chunk of last season as well. So he's another really young guy who's might still be growing into his frame and all that, but. I think the defense is definitely one of the first things that stands out when you watch him. He's just so long. He's really, really long. He had a couple of chase down blocks I remember seeing. Like that's something that you'll see out of him next season is he's going to come out of nowhere and block some, mid-major guy who thinks he has a wide open layup. Like that's going to be a really cool highlight for him. But moves his feet really well. Just kind of like a smart, like in terms of Diabate, like, really good at calling things out, like always talking on defense, pointing around. Tulane ran a lot of zone defense as well, where Cam Williams was in that. So I don't know, like, if Pope wants to run out a zone at all or something like that, shout out to our guy, Stephen Peak. Like you have a guy in Cam Williams who at least has played it before and maybe knows how to play the gaps and do that a little bit better than some of his teammates. So, but I'll be honest, it felt like there were times where Cam Williams just kind of disappears in games where he's just not really. And maybe part of that is just Tulane had so many other guys that really kind of needed the ball to be effective. So he just at some point just kind of became a little bit of an afterthought in their offense. But his catch and shoot stuff, like you're going to see some of these numbers popping up on here, like an elite, just like once the ball's in his hands, he can get it up pretty fast. He can shoot from deep, like 3, 4, 5 feet from behind the line. So he's going to make himself a really nice threat from the corners and from the side of the break as well over there. But getting to the rim, things like that, like you just didn't see too much of that last season. Again, that might just be a byproduct of having guys that just had the ball in their hands more, and there just was not nearly as many opportunities for a guy like him to really go and get himself his own bucket. So, but I don't also think that that's what he's here to do. I think he's here to do exactly what his title is, which is 3-and-D. He's here to shoot threes and play defense. So I think he'll fit in pretty snugly with that. Again, I don't really know what his role is going to be. Like, I could easily see him like kind of jumping out immediately and having like the Oweh type offseason where you're like, oh my gosh, this guy actually might be one of our better players type deal. And, he could come in and maybe not be a starter, but be a key rotation guy, play 15, 20 minutes a game. I could also easily just to see him kind of getting stuck behind guys like Colin Chandler and Aberdeen and like just, being like maybe the third or fourth guy off the bench in that backcourt. So I don't really know exactly what to think of Cam Williams. I think he's got a lot of positives and I think his playmaking ability is probably a little bit underrated as well. Like I think he's got some nice chops there. I saw some really cool like left-handed passes from the right-handed guy, so that was cool to see that he's a little bit versatile in that ability. Nice little elevator screen that he pulls up through there to get an open three. So he's got a lot of really cool traits and like things that you can be like, okay, that's nice. Like that's a positive. Those are good. But I don't really know how I see it all translating in his what he'll probably be 18 or 19 for most of his actual sophomore season. But Brandon, what are your thoughts on that in terms of what maybe his role will actually be like? What will be expected of him? Do you think in his first season at Kentucky?
Yeah, I think that with how talented these guards and wings are, and obviously we'll get into the guard position in a future video, but I think a lot of times those guys are going to kind of creep up into these wings as well. I mean, Kentucky's going to play 3 guards a lot of times at the 1, 2, and 3, so these guys will sort of get lumped in with the Otega Owe's, the Colin Chandlers, the Denzel Aberdeens of the world that are bigger, longer guards as well. So I think it certainly remains to be seen where he falls into that pecking order. I think if you're looking at the depth chart going into the first practice, I personally probably put him behind all of those guys. Like I'd put him behind Colin Chandler, even I'd put him behind Denzel Aberdeen. But he's absolutely. I mean, first of all, that's not a slight by any means. We're talking about guys that
he's
have
veterans, guys that
already
are older.
proven things.
Yeah,
at this high major
national
level,
champion is ahead of him. That's okay.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think that when you have such a high level discernible skill, and that skill happens to be shooting the heck out of the basketball, sometimes it's going to be really hard to keep those guys off of the floor, especially for a team where maybe there will be a question mark here or there about we need to get more shooting on the floor. Well, anytime Mark Pope looks down at his assistants, is like, man, like we need some shooting out there. I think everybody's answer will be like, well, you want to put Cam in? Like, hey, Cam, let's go. Like, I think that's going to be the answer. And I think that you could see that become, we might be getting to that more and more as the season goes on, especially if his percentages hold up. But I think that the thing to be excited about with his shooting is that I have very little concern about it translating to Kentucky. First off, shooting generally travels. That's a skill that can kind of transcend levels, but it definitely transcends levels when you're 6'8" and you have high major athleticism. If he was some, scrawny 6'2" white guy coming from, Indiana State, maybe I would have a little bit more pause, but like this dude played at Tulane. They're in a no comment. But he Conference USA or the American or whatever Tulane's in now, like it's the 6th, 7th best league in college basketball. Like, this guy played at a pretty darn high level, had a decent amount of success. He's ready to translate to this level because of that athleticism, what he can bring on the defensive end of the floor. So I think that for a team that might need some influxes of shooting, anytime Coach Pope looks down, I think that it's like, all right, Cam, go in there and make us a couple threes.
Yeah, and like against Memphis, which was a really there was varying thoughts on how good Memphis was, I guess, last year. But in the conference tournament, 16 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, a block, played 36 minutes. Like this guy, Cam wasn't a starter for the first 5 or 6 games, and then immediately worked himself into the starting rotation and was like to the point where Coach Hunter couldn't take him out. So, like you were saying, like maybe it just gets to the point where you're like, man, it's just hard to keep this guy off the floor, especially if he's hitting shots. So, and I think it showed, it flashed up there, like his usage rate was like 12%. Like he's just not someone that really had the ball in his hands all that often if he wasn't catching and shooting or anything like that. But he is a very good athlete. One thing I noticed is he doesn't really get sped up. Like on the rare occasions that he will try and like create his own shot and get to the bucket, he never would. He played to his own pace pretty well, I thought, for the most part. Not a high turnover guy either. Again, didn't have the ball in his hands too much, but it's a good sign that he wasn't turning the ball over all that often. But when you're getting a guy who was putting up the numbers that he was in like a pretty decent conference, making all freshmen for his conference, and then you see the size and the tools and all that, you can see a world where, okay, this guy is going to be pretty good, probably pretty fast. Like I said, I don't really know how it'll all fit in. I mean, if the shooting, if he immediately comes in and can prove he can be a 40% guy from 3, like hell, he'll probably play a lot on this team. So that'll probably be the big thing with him. I think his defense will be able to keep up. I'm sure that'll translate pretty quickly for him once he adjusts himself to the SEC because that non-conference schedule for Kentucky is going to be brutal. So there won't be much time to kind of get your feet under you. Brandon, anything else you want to talk about with Cam before we move on to our Mountain Mamba boy?
No, let's Mountain Mamba.
All right. Well, here I'm going to remove this again and then let you riff for a second on.
Absolutely.
Trent.
All right. Well,
Are we lagging at all?
The video was a little laggy there, but I think you and I seem to be fine. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah, go for it.
Yep. I think that with Trent Noah, the first thing that comes to mind is the exact same quote that I used when talking about Malachi Moreno, and that is, I think that he's going to play exactly how much he needs to play this season. I think that if you're just writing down the names on a piece of paper, I think that on day one or on May 8th? I can't say
8th.
Yeah, May 8th as we recorded this. I think on May 8th, he's probably the 11th man. Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, the 11th man doesn't play in the basketball games. He certainly doesn't play meaningful minutes in the important games. I think that there's a very real world where that's the Trent Noah role this season. You know, knock on wood, let's not have the injuries we had last season. Let's keep our 11th man the 11th man all year. And I think if that's the case, there's going to be a lot of games where Trent Noah doesn't see the floor. There's going to be games where Trent Noah plays 2 minutes. There's probably going to be a couple games where Trent Noah plays 17 minutes because there's foul trouble or somebody misses one game or whatever it may be. And the great thing is that Trent Noah, I said it with Travis Perry when he was on the team too, Trent Noah is overqualified to be the 11th man. Like, Kentucky wouldn't necessarily be worse if he was the 9th or 10th man, but I do think that, you know, anytime you can shift guys down a rung or two on the depth chart, it obviously just makes you, better, deeper, more talented, whatever it may be. Because he's capable. We saw it for half the year last year. He's capable of playing
Tennessee road game right here.
Yeah, I mean, he's a big part of winning at Tennessee last season. He's going to come in and make shots. He's going to understand what his assignment is. He's going to execute it to the best of his ability. Yeah, he's always going to have some athletic limitations, and he's not the quickest guy, the most fluid around the court, but he is strong. He's tough. He plays really hard. He's going to be able to track down some rebounds, things like that. He's at least positionally going to be in the right spot defensively, and he's going to shoot the heck out of the ball when he's open. But I think that what's exciting about Trent Noah is exactly that. It's that he is an overqualified 11th man, but I also think it's exciting, quite frankly, that he's the 11th man. Like, you probably don't want to go into this season relying super heavily on Trent Noah. That's not a knock on Trent Noah. There's enough, there has to be some nuance to this. Like, it's okay to say that I don't think he's a guy that's going to help you win the SEC championship if he's playing 20 minutes a game. Does that mean that he'll never be that guy? No, that's not what I'm saying. I just think that right now as a sophomore, I would rather him be our 11th man than our 8th man. And but he also is proven that if he becomes our 8th man, we don't have to throw every, goal for the season out the window. You can still make a Sweet 16 with Trent Noah as your 8th or 9th man because we just did it. So that's what I like about Trent Noah. And you would assume that after a full year of high major strength and conditioning, a full year of going against high major players in practice, now a full off season at Kentucky, he's probably only going to be that much better as a sophomore than he was as a freshman. So I'm excited about whatever role Trent Noah ends up playing on this team.
Noah he already has a year of experience. He's already done this. He's played a full season at Kentucky, well, half a season essentially in terms of actual games played. So he has the experience. He knows what to do. He knows what's expected of him. Mark Pope was kind of adamant in his interview with John Ross. He's like, the second year is when my guys start picking things up. They start learning. So I think that's the best part about Trent is that you kind of know what you're going to get. Like, last year was the worst Trent Noah will look in college, ideally. So he's only going to keep getting better. I do think he needs to get in better shape. I think that's probably his main goal for this offseason is to get in better shape. And if he can do that and maybe get his athleticism a little bit, more up to SEC standards, you can start to see a better player start to shine through. But like you said, Brandon, if he's your like, is Kentucky will any team in the country have better 11th, 12th, and 13th men than Trent Noah, Malachi Moreno, and Reese Potter? Like,
Pretty
probably
good.
not. Maybe a handful of teams. So like you said, you won't feel like you would feel maybe a little shaky if you have to throw in Malachi or Reese Potter, like in a break in case of emergency thing. I don't think you would have that much hesitation with throwing in Trent Noah in whatever situation happens, whether it's foul trouble or injuries, where he has to come in and spot you 15 minutes. Like, you know that he's going to be able to not burn things down, essentially. So I think there's a world, and I actually think we live in the world where Trent Noah and Travis Perry are both productive college basketball players. I don't know when that will be or where that will be, but I think they both eventually get there. So it's just Trent, obviously Trent knows the deal. Like, he came back knowing what the situation at Kentucky was going to be. He knew, like, he made his own decision to come back with the roster essentially full. Did he announce before or after Aberdeen? I kind of forget. I
No,
don't
I
know the
think he was
exact time.
before. It seemed like he was pretty early on. I think.
Yeah, he might have been before Aberdeen then, but like, even still, like, he knew what his role was going to be, and it wasn't going to be like a high usage one. So he's willing to accept that and kind of do what Cam Williams is going to have to do, which is like, all right, I'm going to shoot the ball so well that you are going to have to keep me on the court at times and bring me off the bench.
Right.
So, how much does he improve overall defensively? Like, that kind of goes back to my point about him getting in shape. Like, I just think he's going to have to be able to defend better and move his feet better. Because I think that was not a major issue. Like, it's not like he was getting hunted on defense like Travis Perry was at times. But he wasn't, a plus defender. I wouldn't say. You might have a different opinion on that than I do, but so I think, yeah, Trent Noah, 11th man. You're not going to find many better than him. I don't really have too many more thoughts on Trent, to be honest with you, Brandon, unless you got anything else you want to chip in with him.
No, I think it is the shooting ability that, just like we talked about with Cam. I mean, if you look down the bench and you're like, man, like, we got to get some shooters out there, then yeah, like I think that even if he remains the 11th man, because he's an overqualified 11th man, there will be games where he plays a real role in them, because you give him a rotation, he makes 2 threes in the first half. Well, that means you're probably going to play him 6 minutes in the second half here to see what
Mm-hmm.
happens. And he certainly, as a freshman, proved that he is capable of filling that role a little bit. So again, for a team where maybe there will be situations or games or whatever where you need a little bit of a lift shooting wise, then it's going to be really, really nice looking down the bench and seeing Trent Noah sitting down there.
Yeah, and as we know, Pope, he's quick with rotations. He wants to feed as many guys as many minutes as possible, and really get them that run in the regular season. So when you get to the postseason, like we saw, where you're not like kind of just pooping your pants because you have to play true freshmen from Kentucky that only have maybe 15 minutes of experience all season. So yeah, it'll be nice to have Trent on the team, especially going into this season. So we'll see. I do think he'll end up, especially early on, like, he's going to get rotational minutes. Like, Pope will throw him in there. It won't be on the first or second, maybe the third rotation in the first half, especially if UK's got a lead. He'll come in and stuff like that. But he's just a nice piece to have. Continuity is huge. You got another guy who knows the system, knows the program, knows a few of his other teammates. Like, that stuff is, especially in the transfer portal era, is probably a little bit, maybe even bigger than we give credit to. So
No doubt about it.
I think we're done here. Unless anything else you want to chip in, any other, going back to Mo or Cam, any other last second thoughts you got on our three wings here?
No, I don't think so. I think, yeah, I mean, give us some grace.
Trent Noah might
the
be the
wings.
only wing on this
Yeah,
actual
I mean,
roster, for
because
being
yeah, I
honest.
mean, like I said, I mean, Colin Chandler and Otega Owe, like even Denzel Aberdeen, like those guys are going to probably play some minutes, like at the 3, which I kind of look at as the wing. Mo Diabate is probably not going to play hardly any minutes at the 3 on the wing, but hey, it's our show. We get to call it how we want. So
Exactly, we can do as we please. So, all right, we will do the backcourt next. That one's probably going to be even longer than we're about to go 45 minutes on this second video as well. That one will be even longer because we're going to have 5 players in that group. We're going to have Jasper Johnson, Jalen Lowe, Otega Owe, Colin Chandler, Denzel Aberdeen. I think that's right.
Yep.
I think that's all of them. Yeah. So that's a fun backcourt. So we'll do that. That video will drop next Sunday. But this has been us for here. Let me go ahead and give us a proper send off here. Get that out of the way.
Yeah.
All right, there we are. Yeah, beautiful. You look great today, Brandon. Really,
Thank
really
you. You
just
too.
shining over there. Yeah, I like.
Your hair's really popping today.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I just did it before we got on. All right. Well, we will see y'all next time. Yeah, shout out to Zoom Action and shout out to Mo Diabate, Cam Williams, and Trent Noah for giving us some content.